It's Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We're in the San Fernando Valley today, and we are joined by Dante Acosta. He is the Mayor Pro Tem of the city of Santa Clarita. He is a nominee for the California State Assembly. That election will be held on November 8th. The district currently held by Scott Wilk. Mr. Wilk is running for Senate, so it's an open seat. Congratulations on advancing to the general election. I want to talk about why you're running for the Assembly. You got a nice life in Santa Clarita. You could be there with your kids and wife. Why do you want to go to Sacramento?
What's wrong with getting on an airplane every Monday morning and flying an hour?
Exactly, right.
You know, it boils down to this. I've had a blessed time living in Santa Clarita. I'm from the San Fernando Valley in the district. And I just care so passionately about the area, about the people I live with and work with around the area, and about this state. And I just see so many things that are happening in the state, from the business environment to crime and other issues, water infrastructure, things like that, that really need some attention of someone who's got a diverse business background and has the local requisite government experience.
And let's talk about that because, like you said, you had worked business for many years. You then went to work for Steve Knight, both when he was in the Senate and the Congress.
That's correct.
You're an elected official in a very significant city, Santa Clarita. That's not a small city. How does that experience inform you, and how will it inform you, presuming victory?
Well, it's a great question, and I think when you take a look at someone who's actually sat on the dais and worked with not only staff but other elected officials, the community, business leaders, you are able to look at things from various perspectives. Working for an elected official as well, you deal with constituents and constituent issues from their angle and from their perspective, trying to assist them with the various government agencies, whether it was the state Senate side when Senator Knight, then Senator Knight, or the federal government side, and the transition there to work with these various multitude of government agencies.
City. You got your city experience,
and then
state and federal.
Third largest city in LA County now, Santa Clarita. So we deal with complex issues having to deal with zoning, with infrastructure issues, with development issues, traffic, crime. All of those issues come together, and as the person that's making one of the decision makers making those decisions, you have to really make sure that you're up on the issues. You talk to everyone, which I do on a regular basis, from all different viewpoints. Sit down with them and look at how can we best serve our community with budgets in mind, with the law in mind, and the various other things that we have to do.
And let's talk about talking to everyone, because you are a member of the Republican Party, and presumably the Democrats will retain control of the Assembly and the Senate. Who knows? Anything could happen. Anything could happen. And so let's just presume, for argument's sake, you're victorious. And that the Republicans are in the minority. How do you plan to work with your friends on the Democratic side? How will you talk to everyone, talk to the Democrats, so that you become relevant? Because look, there are plenty of Republicans in the Assembly that have done well because they are able to interact and be friends with their Democratic colleagues.
Well, I think one of the things you start with good, solid relationships before you try to tackle the legislative side. In business, we like to say that people want to do business with people that they like. So let's just start with the fact that I have pre-existing relationships with people on both sides of the aisle, both parties, both working in government, but also working in private industry and being involved with the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, as we talked about earlier.
Nonpartisan organization.
Nonpartisan organization. So you're at these conferences for a decade, and you develop relationships. So when you walk up and say, hey Bob, you're
Hertzberg,
who's
a senator here in this area.
And we have a relationship, and others, you're able to now to sit down from the common ground there, but also let's work on good legislation. My predecessor, the current Assemblyman Scott Wilk, who is supporting my campaign, he worked, for example, on the film tax credit. Okay. Well, that benefits everyone.
With Ian Calderon, a Democrat.
Exactly. So when you look at those issues and you say, how are we going to do something that works for everyone? Well, film tax credit is a great starting point. Now I think maybe we need to start looking at some of our manufacturing base and other things to maybe try to keep and retain some jobs.
Let's presume victory. And you get to Sacramento and you see Chad Mays, who's your leader, and Mr. Mays says to you, Dante, what committees do you want to be on? I guess ultimately the speaker, Anthony Rendon, has the final say, but look, Chad and Mr. Rendon, I presume, have good relations, so what committees would you be looking at?
You know, I think a couple of things I'd like to look at. First of all, it's not very sexy, but the budget.
I mean, to nerds like us, it's sexy.
It's sexy.
Right.
So when you start with the budget and you work on the budget, you know a lot more about the government and all the inner workings there. And then also business and professions. So I hold a multitude of different licenses and my wife does in the medical field.
Is she a doc or a?
She's on the technical side,
Nice.
so she does X-ray and a bunch of other
Smart
things.
one in the
EKG,
family.
she's definitely the smart and the pretty one in the
Right,
family.
clearly.
Absolutely. Right, clearly. And so you look at these different licensures and things that we're doing, and are we pricing those fees and those licenses the right way? You know, just to take a good hard look at that as well.
Can we talk about the business environment?
Sure.
Because when I look at California, I feel as if we are so darn schizophrenic in a lot of different ways, but we do kind of send distinct messages that may conflict. How do you see, as a potential member of the Assembly, the ability to try to balance California's conflicting desires for regulating the environment, but also creating a positive business environment?
Well, it's vital, for one thing. If we don't have a solid business climate and business environment to either retain or attract new employers, you know, we obviously erode our tax base. You can't rely just on property taxes, because if people can't afford the homes, then the prices drop, and then so does your revenue to the various government agencies. So I don't believe for a moment that they're mutually exclusive. I mean, we are the most environmentally, or one of the most environmentally conscious large economies, both the state level and the federal level. But these things aren't done in a vacuum. So if California, for example, has very stringent air quality control standards, and we lose an employer, or we send our 3-year-old or 5-year-old diesel trucks, which we're doing, to Arizona or Nevada to work, those trucks are still polluting and putting things out in the air. You know, and all we're doing is really harming a business owner who now has to spend millions of dollars to upgrade their equipment.
I mean, look,
so
I get
it's a
it.
balancing act, right?
Right. I mean, you don't want the kids to have asthma who live near the diesel
Absolutely.
truck site.
But we have to be a bit more pragmatic in the approach, because if you talk to business owners, they're saying, I just made a $2 million investment in an equipment that the state certified 3 years ago, and now they're telling me I have to get rid of it.
But here's what's confusing. You have a governor, a Democratic governor, who has said, it is the Lord's work to reform CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act.
Right.
You have plenty of, we'll call them business-friendly Democrats, if I can use that cliche. You got Republicans who are looking to reform regulation. What's the delay? Get up there already.
Yeah,
What's the
I'll
delay?
get up there. You know, well, it's funny you mentioned that, because in the Santa Clarita Valley, we had a very famous CEQA lawsuit case with the Newhall Ranch development. 20,000 homes, its own community schools, shopping, the whole thing, and a lot of it industrial and commercial space. And because of the CEQA lawsuits, the 10-year, 20-year process of CEQA lawsuits, the last straw was, or it's still obviously going through the courts, but you know, the courts ruled that you need to meet new CEQA standards. They're saying, well, we met the CEQA standards 10 years ago, you're moving the goalposts.
So
we can't keep doing that.
Do you plan to go to Sacramento and look at bona fide CEQA reform? I would think there's a bipartisan answer there, I would think.
Absolutely, and I'm also prepared to come on shows like yours and articulate these messages and talk about why it's hurting and how it's hurting the average Joe and Jane out there, that they're the ones that are sacrificing. You know, Tesla's the brainchild of Silicon Valley, and yet they built their factory in Nevada because, boom, you couldn't do it here. I'll come back soon.
He's Dante Acosta, Mayor Pro Tem of Santa Clarita, nominee for California State Assembly. Brett Pomerance, your local edition.